it was really my brother and I, and he spoke first, and he said, let's let him go. So if I had agreed, we would, and if I disagreed, we wouldn't. I'm Shulamith Clearbridge. I'm a member of Swarthmore monthly meeting in Philly, or near Philly. The pamphlet is called Plain Talk About Dying, Spiritual Effects of Taking My Father Off Life Support. Well, what happened is we had spent time as a family talking about living well, what we wanted in this instance, in this instance, in this instance. And my father always said two things. He always said, keep me alive as long as you can, and don't ever put me in a home, which meant a nursing home. And what happened was the only choices left to him were the two that he said never to do. And at that point, he couldn't communicate very well, and so we weren't sure how much he understood what happened. And it ended up falling to me as the deciding vote in whether to disconnect the life support. There was my mother and my brother and his wife and I, and we left the decision to my mother, and she felt like it would be murder to disconnect him. And that we knew it wasn't, because what we were doing was preventing his death with the life support. But that doesn't make you feel any better. So due to family dynamics, she made the decision, then I made the decision, and then she looked at us. And it was really my brother and I, and he spoke first, and he said, let's let him go. So if I had agreed, we would, and if I disagreed, we wouldn't. So it felt like I was deciding. When I told my Quaker meeting that my father had died, people flooded me with emails, cards, and hugs. That lasted about 2 weeks, but after that, no one asked me how I was doing or invited me to talk about my father. I was surprised at how unwilling even my close friends were to listen to me talk about what happened. They let me tell them about it shortly after the funeral, but after that, I felt like they didn't want to hear my sadness. I knew several of them loved me, so perhaps they suffered in the listening and couldn't manage that pain. I had expected more of them, partly because they're Quakers, partly because many of them have been through hospice training, and partly because of their age, which I expected would give them experience about what a mourner needs. But I had to turn to my peers, strangers in a group called Death Over Dinner, to have enough time to speak my feelings. I felt estranged from my meeting because of that when I most needed support and prayer. So in dealing with the aftermath of that, I was part of a writing group for people dealing with grief who were stuck. And in the course of the writing and the group, I found healing. And eventually, and when eventually came, I looked back at what I had written and I thought maybe this could help other people. What helped me heal so much was telling my story to the group, as we all did, a little of it each week. That helped my heart finally understand that death was there all along. I didn't bring it. Part of what the group did is they tell you what you don't notice. Like they told me I had courage. They said it took courage to accept making the choice when no one else would, not even my father. This hadn't occurred to me. I thought courage had to be a choice to do something, and I had had no choice, only the necessity to choose. Another thing that came up at the group, the leader asked us to consider if we were being compassionate towards ourselves, and I didn't feel that I deserved it. And as I was sitting there feeling that, I felt my father come and put his hand on my shoulder. And I felt comfort, I felt heat. What I wrote was, my father answered my question with his own compassion. I had several mystical experiences with my father that really helped. So I've been encouraging people after the death of a loved one to go ahead and talk to them, ask them things, write to them, whatever. And another crucial point was one night after I told my next chapter, someone leaned over and said, God loves you. And in a few seconds, I realized that was true. And I wrote in my grief journal, God loves me as I am. This includes my struggle at the time and my struggle to forgive myself now. God finds no need to forgive me. God simply loves that I loved and that I struggle. And it's true for you in whatever situation you're in. You know, where you feel like, oh my God, God won't forgive me. I don't forgive God. I don't forgive my father. I don't forgive myself. I don't forgive my family. And it's all just because we're so upset, you know. Really, if everyone's doing the best they can, there's no forgiveness required. You're doing the best. You can't do more than the best you can. That's something else I learned, is we have standards for ourselves that are superhuman. We expect to know everything, see everything, predict everything, prevent all the bad stuff, show up in the nick of time like, you know, Captain Kirk. You know, this is not human. We do our best, and the best is good enough because that's all there is our best. So that's something else I wanted to communicate here was you love to your utmost and you do your best. So part of this is thoughts of my own death. What is it going to be like for me? What would I require of people and hope that I got? You know, that sort of thing. What is compassion? What is love? What is forgiveness, for that matter? What's the meaning of life? I mean, you deal with those every time you turn a birthday with a round number. You know, you deal with what's the meaning of life. But this was different. And I had to, you know, facing that death, I had to face my own in a way I hadn't yet. And that part of that was solved by going to the cemetery too, taking my mother to the cemetery a year or maybe two later. You know, there's the whole family's stones. There's my father's, and next to him is a space for my mom. And half the tombstone is blank, waiting for her. And next to that are two empty spots, which were for my brother and I, if we didn't marry, or since he married, he and his wife. And I got there and I looked at those and I thought, it was like whatever had gone out of place went back into place. And, death is normal. Death is coming. I didn't bring death. Life and death are mingled all the time. And so that was accepting death to that extent was a new thing and a good thing. And that has made my life very different. So there were many blessings in this. I'm not saying it's good that it happened because of the blessings. You know, it's not good that it happened. But the blessings are extraordinary. The two things that I am grateful for that I found, one is I had to turn to God so much, which if I had 25 friends carrying me, I might not have time, except to thank God for those friends. But I had to open much, much wider to the divine. And that's life-changing in itself. And because times were so hard for so many years before his death too, I had to cultivate a practice of joy. And it's not like, oh, well, on Saturday I'll take an hour or two and look at a beautiful tree. It is every day, more than once if possible, joy. And waking up in the morning, looking forward to something. When I'm connected to the divine, the joy is there. It's there, and it saves your life through the hard times because you feel them and you work to remedy them, but they're not killing your soul and taking your strength and your health. So the practice of joy, it is one of the great blessings